What's up, Taiwan? I'm Jaime Ocon with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Taiwan has criticized China's plan to suspend preferential tariff rates on some Taiwanese imports.
我们要在这里表达强烈的抗议及不满。我想相关的后果应该由陆方来承担。我想这种对台施压、恐吓的政治操作，只会扭曲两岸经贸原本互利互惠的发展方向。
The head of Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council said Beijing's unilateral move breaks WTO rules. China suspended the tariff relief on 134 Taiwanese products. The move came less than 2 weeks since President Lai Ching-te took office and followed 2 days of Chinese military exercises around Taiwan. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. of the Philippines has denounced any illegal and aggressive actions in the South China Sea. Here's what he had to say.
We reject any attempt to deny strategic agencies, especially by force, that seek to subordinate our interests to anyone else's. China's determining influence over the security situation and the economic evolution of this region is a permanent fact. At the same time, the stabilizing presence of the United States is crucial to regional peace. It's never a choice. Both countries are important.
Marcos was speaking at the opening of the Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore. He says the Philippines will work to maintain stability in the South China Sea. Beijing and Manila have clashed in that region in recent months, with Chinese Coast Guard ships blasting water cannons at Philippine vessels in disputed waters. Now, the Shangri-La dialogue will continue until Sunday, and one of the biggest topics is how to prevent conflict in the Taiwan Strait. For more on what other countries like the U.S. can do to deter aggression in the region, I spoke with Jessica Taylor, a security analyst at the Atlantic Council based in Washington, D.C. So, Jessica, Taiwan is not at the Shangri-La dialogue, but we've heard a number of countries talk about the need for this maritime security in the Indo-Pacific, like the United States. Do you think we're going to hear more about this need for collective security in regard to preventing a war in Asia?
I think that's just something that we don't talk about enough. A lot of Taiwan comes into play, but we also need to think about the possibility of conflict with the Philippines and China. But then, North Korea, there's a lot of discussion about why North Korea is doing what it's doing right now. Like, is it building up towards the U.S. Presidential election? Is it because of the trilateral summit between China, Japan, and South Korea the other day? So there's a couple of different avenues that I think are going to be discussed. Not just what's going on with China, but also with North Korea and the possibility of simultaneous conflict involving multiple players, and not sure, which conflict could spark that simultaneous conflict, in the possibility that these different partners and their different alignments are going to have to be able to coordinate in a possible future conflict.
Now, because the Asia-Pacific region is so dynamic, we have developments in the South China Sea, around Taiwan, and also up in the Korean Peninsula. Aside from this dialogue, what else needs to be prioritized? So
I think that's also why it's important when we do have multinational, multilateral exercises, that we shouldn't take for granted that we've had Taiwan participation into those. I think the more and more that we're having these collective security type of dialogues and military exercises, there's so much discussion about the military side of it and the military hardware. It's also the discussions that are happening about just military threat perception, and trying to have greater alignment in trying to make sure that we can cooperate, especially if we have a contingency across the Taiwan Strait and we have a contingency, on the Korean Peninsula. We should be ready for simultaneous conflict from the outset. So while we might be, organized in our different bilateral or hub and spoke alliances, conflicts don't necessarily play out that way. So we need to have continue to have, I think we're having some baby steps towards that collective security.
That was security analyst Jessica Taylor from the Atlantic Council. U.S. President Joe Biden is calling on Hamas to accept a new ceasefire offer from Israel.
This new proposal has 3 phases. 3. The first phase would last for 6 weeks. Here's what it would include: a full and complete ceasefire, a withdrawal of Israeli forces from all populated areas of Gaza, release of a number of hostages, including women, the elderly, the wounded, in exchange for release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners.
A previous ceasefire proposal fell through after Israel refused to agree to a permanent end to its war in Gaza in exchange for remaining Israeli hostages held by Hamas. Israel instead launched an assault on the city of Rafah. Hamas says it won't continue with negotiations until Israel stops the war. Palestinian health authorities say more than 36,000 Palestinians have died since the war began in October. Biden said that he believed Hamas is no longer capable of carrying out another attack on Israel like the October 7 attack that triggered the current conflict. It's the last week of polling before India chooses its new government. But while victory is almost certain for the ruling party, the opposition are still putting up a fight. Sally Ensign reports from Kolkata.
An election rally for the All India Trinamool Congress, or TMC, India's third biggest opposition party under firebrand leader Mamata Banerjee. Thousands of her supporters have shown up on the streets of Kolkata, where she serves as chief minister. They're trying to show there's an alternative to the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP.
আমরা মেয়েরা ভালো আছি, আমাদের কোনো রাত বিরেতে বেরোচ্ছি কিন্তু কোনো অসুবিধা নেই, কিচ্ছু নেই, আমরা সবসময় ভালো আছি। আর কি চাই দিদির কাছে? দিদি যা চাইছে তার থেকে বেশি দিচ্ছে, অনেক বেশি দিচ্ছে।
এই উন্নয়নের দিক দিয়ে জোয়ার এসে যায়, দিদির জন্য অনেক কিছু আমরা পেয়েছি, দিদির জন্য আমরা পশ্চিমবাংলার মানুষ সুখে শান্তিতে বাস করতে পারছে।
If BJP win, it's really a miracle because in every state anti-BJP projects is now very much familiar to the citizens.
With just days until the result of India's huge general election is announced, it seems that the BJP will secure itself a third consecutive term in government. The party's leader, incumbent Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has been leading in public opinion polls, riding on the support of India's Hindu majority, who make up 80% of the population. But despite a likely loss, India's opposition parties like TMC are in the final push to muster together votes to demonstrate public disillusion with what they say is undemocratic rule under the BJP.
What we fear is what we have seen in the last 10 years under the regime of BJP and the Honorable Prime Minister Mr. Modi is that the country is not progressing, it's progressing on paper. The voice of dissent are being silenced. Democracy is in danger. The Indian Constitution, which gives equal right to every citizen to practice their own religion, people are being divided or people are being polarized on basis of religion, caste, creed and color.
26 opposition parties have formed a coalition known as INDIA, India National Developmental Inclusive Alliance. They say the BJP is becoming increasingly authoritarian under Modi, with the country's Muslim minority facing more discrimination and even violence from Modi's supporters' Hindu-centric rhetoric. Human rights groups also say the BJP's rule is constricting civil society, clamping down on critical voices and arbitrarily detaining journalists. Ruling BJP officials say that such claims are fabricated.
These criticisms have arisen from the fact that the BJP is not a woke liberal outfit. If you say that in terms of constitutional rights, in terms of welfare rights, in terms of any other rights, Muslims have been discriminated against, it's a canard. It has not been found to be true at all.
Political analysts say the opposition's claims of social marginalization may fail to find an audience in this election.
I think that's a narrative that the opposition has constructed, and quite reasonably so. But that's a narrative that's not being bought very well by the young voters.
With polls showing that a BJP win is all but assured, the opposition is trying to unite under the loose INDIA coalition to make a dent in Modi's share of the vote.
Just a couple of days until the results of the world's biggest election are announced, and people here are not convinced that a BJP win is a done deal. They're hoping that by creating as much noise as possible, they can save India's democracy. John Su, Suvan Pal and Sally Jensen in Kolkata for TaiwanPlus.
President Lai Ching-te has paid his respects to 2 firefighters who died in the line of duty. The firefighters were trying to save people trapped in a burning building in Hsinchu earlier this week. The pair were found in a stairwell after they apparently ran out of oxygen. The cause of the fire and the reason for the firefighters' deaths are still being investigated. The deaths have renewed calls for better equipment and safety measures for firefighters. Taiwan's Constitutional Court has struck down height restrictions for firefighters and police in the country. Our reporter Sandy Chi explains why.
Just 1.1 centimeters too short. That's why Chen Yunxuan couldn't become a firefighter. In 2018, she passed the certification test for would-be firefighters, but was eliminated from the program after a physical exam, extinguishing her dream. Taiwan's requirements for police and firefighters say men must be taller than 165 centimeters and women taller than 160 centimeters. For indigenous people, the required height is slightly lower. The National Fire Agency says the height rules are needed as firefighters need to have a certain body type to use their equipment effectively. But on May 31st, Taiwan's Constitutional Court struck down the height requirement for female firefighters, ruling it unconstitutional. And there's no question that when it comes to height, women have a higher bar to meet. The height requirement for men is 7 centimeters lower than average height for men in Taiwan. This generally eliminates around 10% of male candidates. However, for women, the height requirement is half a centimeter higher than the average height for women in the country. This results in the exclusion of more than half of female candidates. The court has ruled such height restrictions would exclude women from becoming first responders, violating the Constitution's equal protection principle. It says the requirement must be removed within a year.
面对各种类型不同的消防勤务以及灾害现场与抢救工作，身高略矮的消防人员除了可以担任一般的勤务之外，进入空间较为狭小的灾害现场也是有它的优势在。
Following the ruling, the National Fire Agency must adjust the basic criteria for selecting female firefighters in the future. Meanwhile, Ms. Chen's case will undergo further review. Her firefighting dream now rekindled. Scott Huang and Sandy Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Summer electricity prices have kicked in here in Taiwan, and household electricity bills may jump by as much as 70%. That's according to state-owned power company Taipower, who says the increase is mainly due to households using more energy in the summer, not from a price hike in April. Taipower rolled out a rate increase for homes and industry. That's after suffering losses for years from keeping prices artificially low. But the company has used seasonal summer pricing for decades. A scenic spot in Miaoli is getting ready to bloom. Local officials have planted more than 30,000 lilies at Holong, Cape of Good Hope, a famous seaside park in northern Taiwan. The indigenous Formosan lily has been gradually disappearing because of climate change, and the park is trying to revitalize the flowers along with Easter lilies. The flowers will bloom throughout July, and officials hope they'll attract more tourists to the area. Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Now, before we go, come along with us to a beach in northeastern Taiwan for the annual Fulong International Sand Sculpture Art Festival, which kicked off on Friday. I'm Jaime Ocon. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
For more news from Taiwan and around the world, download the TaiwanPlus app.